Allison Monroe stepped off the subway at Grand Avenue, her worn suitcase rolling behind her like a silent companion. Inside, her freshly printed script lay tucked between two layers of clothes, 40 pages of dialogue and stage directions she had poured her soul into. Growing up in the city's South Side, she'd spent summers watching corner store performances, where neighbors recited poems and shared stories in broken light. She'd carried those memories into every writing workshop, shaping characters who spoke in clipped rhythms and slang that danced on the edge of poetry. Now, at 28, she had landed an invitation to pitch her play at Meridian Theater. Until their rejection had landed like a cold gust. They had praised her prose but called her world too urban for their audience aesthetic. In their polished lobby, she had smiled through the carefully worded email, thanked them for their time, and walked out feeling smaller than the letterhead they had emblazoned her name upon. All that work rewritten into a phrase, too urban. At home, she'd stared at her bookshelf, plays by Chekhov, Miller, Williams, wondering where the stories of her street corner fit in their canon. Determined not to disappear, Allison had scoured the city for her own stage. A traffic island beneath the overpass offered broken concrete and a ring of streetlights, enough to catch the glow of passing headlights. She spent the next morning securing folding chairs from a community center, borrowing strand lights from a neighbor's stoop party, and convincing her closest friends to serve as cast, Malik as the weary bus driver, Rosa as the single mother with a hidden gift for singing, and Jalen as the poet whose words set storefront windows trembling. By dusk, as traffic hummed overhead, Allison paced the cracked asphalt. She pressed her hand to the script's first page and breathed deeply, feeling the city's pulse beneath her feet. One by one, a handful of passers-by paused. A young couple walking their dog, a security guard on break, a group of students huddled over textbooks on a nearby bench. They eyed the makeshift stage with curiosity, their day-worn faces mirroring the hunger Allison felt in her chest. She lifted her script and began to call out lines, her voice carrying into the tunnel of concrete walls. Mariah wakes before sunrise, her baby sister on her hip, coffee in hand, ready to chase down the day she's always dreamed of. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied as Malik stepped forward in character, his uniform jacket borrowed from an old costume trunk, nodding at a phantom stop sign. As Rosa emerged from the shadow of a graffiti-marked pillar, her mournful lullaby wove through the rumble of cars above. The few listeners leaned closer, the frail barrier between stage and sidewalk dissolving in the evening's hush. When Allison reached the break in the script where Jalen's character lifted his notebook to the lamplight and recited a street poem about borrowed time and stolen futures, even the cars slowed, as if the engines themselves were straining to catch each word. In that moment, Allison felt a fierce certainty. She was exactly where her stories belonged, on pavement under streetlights, reaching ears no gilded theater could ever touch. And as her cast transformed the alley into a theater of honest voices, she realized that tomorrow, strangers would bring their friends, and soon, no one would be able to call her vision too urban again. As the final line hung in the night air, "We are the streets that built this city," Allison felt a thrill of triumph ripple through her chest. She glanced at Malik, whose weathered face shone in the glow of the string lights, and at Rosa, whose eyes glistened with unshed tears. Jalen closed his notebook with a satisfied snap, and the small audience erupted into applause that bounced off the concrete walls and drummed across the overpass above. Unbeknownst to Allison, a young man at the edge of the crowd had captured every moment on his phone. By dawn, the video, simply titled Parkway Premiere, Too Urban for the Stage, Perfect for Reality, had exploded across social media. Hashtags like #UrbanStage and #AlleyTheater trended regionally as shares and comments poured in. Viewers from neighboring cities gasped at the raw immediacy of the performance. The way Jalen's words trembled with hunger, how Rosa's lullaby spoke of hope stitched between hardship, how the bus's rumble became part of the soundtrack rather than an intrusion. News outlets caught wind of the buzz. A local arts blogger penned a glowing review, calling Allison's play a masterpiece of lived experience, and quoted students who said they'd seen their own lives reflected under that flickering lamplight for the first time. A morning TV crew set up cameras on the empty traffic island, framing the overpass as a stage proscenium and interviewing early shift commuters who confessed they'd slowed their cars just to hear the final monologue again. Emboldened by the response, Allison posted a link to her full script on her website, inviting everyone to read and share. She received messages from theater companies across the country. An off-Broadway director asked if she'd consider staging it in their black box. A West Coast festival curator proposed a reading in their new Voices of the City series, and a university drama department requested permission to webcast their student-led production. With each new invitation, Allison felt the walls of Meridian Theater's rejection grow thinner, until they seemed like nothing more than faded chalk on the stage she'd left behind. That weekend, the crowd at the Parkway performance grew tenfold. Folding chairs multiplied, cameras clicked nonstop, and a small food truck rolled in to fuel the cast and audience with hot coffee and empanadas. Strangers joined the circle, speaking lines they'd memorized from the video and swapping interpretations of characters they'd never known until now. In every applause, every shared story, Allison recognized the shifting tide. Her too urban play had found its true home in the streets, and in doing so, had torn up the old notion that any story was unfit for the spotlight. By the third performance, the Parkway had become a pilgrimage site for anyone who believed in art that refused to sit quietly behind velvet ropes. Allison arrived before sunset to find the folding chairs already filled, families with toddlers tucked between their knees, students balancing textbooks and scarves, a handful of well-dressed theater patrons who'd driven from uptown just to see what all the fuss was about. Even the traffic had slowed, drivers nudging their windows down to catch the opening lines drifting beneath the overpass. As the portable lights flickered on, Allison felt the hush settle like a benediction. She opened with a fresh monologue she'd written overnight, an extended scene exploring the camaraderie of late-night corner potlucks, where neighbors from every background shared eked-out dishes and life's secrets over mismatched plates. Her words painted the warm glow of street lamps, the hum of ice-chest radios, and the way laughter could stitch together the frayed edges of a community under strain. Listeners leaned in, their eyes reflecting both recognition and wonder at hearing their own experiences given voice in such rich, lyrical prose. In the second act, Malik reprised his driver's role, but this time, the bus was more than a setting. It became a moving sanctuary. His character recounted midnight rides ferrying workers home, the way the city's lights blurred past like a ribbon of stars, and how every passenger brought a story that wove into the tapestry of the streets. Rosa's mother figure steadied a crying child at the front bumper, her lullaby now layered with verses that recalled her own dreams as a factory worker before the recession stole her job. Each scene surged into the next, and the audience gasped when Jalen emerged with a new poem, an unflinching ode to broken streetlights and crosswalks painted over in fresh rain, metaphors for the city's neglect and its uncanny resilience in the face of erasure. Halfway through, sirens sang from the distance, but they no longer felt like intrusions. They wove into the play's soundscape, reminders that real life was never paused for performance. When the final scene came, a tableau of the entire cast singing a refrain of unity under the rumble of elevated tracks. There were tears and cheers in equal measure. The applause rolled longer than ever, echoing off the concrete pillars until the streetlights blinked in unison, as though even they were moved. That night, news anchors ran extended segments. A cultural critic declared Allison's work theater reborn in the public square, while a theater columnist lamented the loss of the Meridian stage. Their words only fueled the debate. On social media, theater companies hastily issued statements, promising urban narratives in their upcoming seasons. Emails flooded Allison's inbox, both offers to bring the play indoors and invitations to help curate new scripts that reflected overlooked communities. In the quiet aftermath, Allison stood alone on the island, the empty chairs now scattered in soft moonlight. She realized that her guerrilla theater had done more than entertain. It had forced every institution with polished stages to confront the stories they'd dismissed. And as the city's pulse thrummed around her, she understood that the real revolution was just beginning. a wave of word of mouth, footlights under street lamps, and performances that would never again be judged too urban to matter. When the head of Meridian Theater arrived at the Parkway performance, flanked by the artistic director and the chair of the board, she expected disruption. Instead, she stepped onto the curb to find hundreds gathered beneath the lights. Students quoting Allison's lines, families cheering every entrance, and even local news crews streaming live. The chair cleared his throat, adjusted his tie, and asked Allison to join them under the overpass for a private conversation. Under the rumble of passing buses, the board members laid out their concerns: public safety risks, insurance liabilities, the fear that an unauthorized venue undermined their programming. Allison listened quietly, the script's edge still warm in her hand, then spoke with calm authority. "You dismissed my story because it didn't fit your aesthetic. Here, you see it fits people's lives. My play didn't harm anyone. Rather, it healed a part of this city you'd written off." The director fumbled for a response, citing bylaws and artistic standards. But students around them began chanting the play's refrain, "We are the streets that built this city." Their voices carried like a chorus of accusation, and one by one board members exchanged uneasy glances as the chant swelled. A young board member stepped forward, voice soft but firm. "We were wrong. We can't claim to support the arts if we silence the voices we fear." Another added, "Our audience is out here, not just in plush seats." The chair finally nodded, emotion flickering in his eyes. "Allison, we'd like to offer you space in our next season. No edits, no excuses. And we pledge to rewrite our audition policy to honor diverse voices." As the board's formal apology echoed against the concrete walls, the crowd erupted into spontaneous applause, their joy ringing louder than any theater chandelier. Allison felt the weight of every rejection lift in that moment, replaced by the promise that her too urban play would claim its rightful place on the stage she had once been denied. The following week, Allison stepped through Meridian Theater's grand lobby once more, this time under her own banner. The gilded chandelier above felt more welcoming than the austere arches she'd passed on submission day. Backstage, she found her script pinned to a rehearsal room door, alongside the season's lineup. Her play sat nestled between a Shakespeare tragedy and a contemporary experimental piece. Tech crews scurried past with lighting gels and props, their urgency a testament to the production's fast-track schedule. In the vast rehearsal hall, the stage rose like a promise beneath freshly installed footlights. The director greeted Allison with a warm handshake, his late apology still sincere in his eyes. She greeted her cast, Malik, Rosa, Jalen, now clad in linen peasant costumes for dress rehearsal. As the stage manager called places, Allison felt a thrill shoot through her chest. Here was her world of stoop conversations and midnight bus rides, translated into the theater's polished space without compromise. They ran the first scene. Malik, as the bus driver, navigated invisible streets under the arc of a spotlight, his voice carrying an authority both gentle and firm. Rosa's monologue as the single mother echoed through the hall, the acoustics amplifying every tremor of longing in her tone. Jalen's poem in the second act paused the room in reverent silence, his words now sung by recorded street sounds swirling in the surround sound system. At the end of the scene, the cast held their breath while Allison watched the director's reaction from the wings. His nod of approval felt like a benediction. Over the next days, rehearsals sharpened every moment. Set builders coated the stage floor in cracked pavement textures. Costume designers splashed authentic graffiti patterns onto period jackets. Sound engineers looped distant traffic hum to weave into the underscore. Allison worked side by side with them, sharing neighborhood anecdotes. How a late-night taco stand conversation inspired a joke in Act 3, or how the corner store cashier's lullaby shaped Rosa's final melody. Her world seeped into every technical choice, and the production team began calling her our city voice. Opening night arrived with a buzz unmatched by any previous Meridian production. The plush house lights dimmed, the orchestra's tuning notes faded, and a hush enveloped the audience. Allison took a seat in the front row, heart pounding as the curtain rose on her Parkway reborn. Every laugh, every gasp felt amplified in her chest. The bus driver's weary confession, the mother's hopeful vow, the poet's defiant farewell. When the final tableau, a united chorus beneath a painted street lamp, filled the stage, the audience leapt to their feet in a roar that shook the balconies. Backstage, the cast hugged amidst tears and laughter, the director's eyes shining with pride. Reviewers scribbled notes with reverent smiles. Patrons spilled into the lobby, clamoring for additional shows. Invitations flooded in, from regional festivals to televised interviews, each one affirming that stories of asphalt and apartment steps held universal power. As Allison stepped into the theater's hushed exit corridor, she realized that every wall she'd once met with defiance had now become a doorway, proof that telling one's truth, however urban, could transform not just a play, but the very stage itself. In the weeks after the triumphant premiere, Allison found herself pulled into meetings she never could have imagined. First with Meridian's casting committee, then with the city's theater alliance. At Meridian, the artistic director invited her to join a panel revising audition guidelines. No longer would writers or actors be dismissed for dialect, setting, or socioeconomic lens. Instead, plays would be assessed on authenticity and craft, with special consideration for stories from underrepresented communities. Allison watched as her Too Urban play became the template for this inclusive charter, its language woven into official documents that would guide theater selection for years to come. Beyond Meridian, other companies took notice. The local outdoor Shakespeare troupe invited her to adapt a passage into a modern inner-city monologue. A community theater in the suburbs asked her to lead workshops on writing characters who truly reflect neighborhood diversity. Allison spent afternoons coaching high school students in storytelling circles, urging them to mind their own experiences, corner store customers, bus riders, block party hosts, for dramatic gold. Their excitement reminded her of her own first script, scribbled on a diner napkin, and she felt the current of change flowing through a new generation of playwrights. Meanwhile, the city's Arts Council approached Allison to help launch an annual Urban Voices Festival, a week-long celebration of plays, readings, and staged readings performed in unconventional spaces, alleyways, parking lots, community centers. As festival curator, she selected works that spanned spoken-word dramas to interactive street theater, each piece echoing the pulse of its neighborhood. On the festival's opening night, the same traffic island where she'd first dared to perform glowed with lanterns as audiences moved from one pop-up stage to the next, discovering stories that had too long waited in the city's shadows. As autumn's chill settled in, Allison looked back on the months of transformation, from rejection letter to policy change, from DIY performance to institutional reform, and recognized that her journey had become something larger, a movement rewriting the unwritten rule that any story deemed too urban could never stand beside the classics. In her heart, she knew the real legacy would be the countless voices now emboldened to step forward, scripts in hand, ready to claim every stage in the city, block by block. The spring sun warmed the newly planted flower beds that edged the traffic island stage as Allison Monroe stepped into a sea of folding chairs filled with familiar faces. Neighborhood families, suburban theatergoers, down-and-out poets, and the once skeptical board members of Meridian Theater. Tonight was the closing ceremony of the inaugural Urban Voices Festival, and the air buzzed with pride rather than protest. As she took the small podium carved from reclaimed wood, she remembered the first time she'd arrived here, script in hand, alone against the hum of passing buses. She began by thanking everyone who had believed in two urban stories: the cast who braved headlights instead of footlights, the audience who chose curbside seats over velvet rows, the city officials who rewrote rules so every voice could find its stage. Then, she introduced the festival's final act, a tapestry of monologues from 7 emerging writers, each representing a different district. One spoke of a grandmother's buttered cornbread and broken school windows, another of a subway platform turned pulpit for midnight sermons, another of street vendors whose shouts sold more than just falafel. They sold community. As each performer took the makeshift stage, the crowd leaned forward to catch every nuance of dialect and heartbeat of their hometowns. When the last line faded, Our corners are cathedrals, our sidewalks are sagas. The applause rose as one thundering wave, echoing into the dusk. Allison watched tears on the faces of theater critics, who had once judged her too urban, now wiping cheeks as if ashamed they'd missed the stories in their own city. She felt her heart swell with the knowledge that her solitary act of defiance had rippled outward, creating new stages in every alley, plaza, and empty lot. Walking home under a veil of lantern light, Allison paused at the island's edge to trace the words she'd painted months ago on a rusted lamppost. Every story deserves its spotlight. She ran her fingers along the chipped paint, worn but unyielding, knowing that long after the festival tents came down, the city would carry its urban voices forward. And in that moment, surrounded by the soft hum of distant traffic and the fading echoes of monologues, she understood her true legacy. A city that had learned to see its own reflection in the mirror of its streets and to celebrate every single voice that rose to speak.